So I was thinking today, and it's probably a dangerous thing to do, but I was thinking, what if what if the things that we're seeing in our society today, what if they don't have anything really to do with race and everything that has to do with the social construct of classes? Meaning that if you were to look just solely at the classes, would you see a pattern of behavior irregardless of the race? This is just a working theory. And I know it in a culture in a society where emotions um, and feelings reign supreme over the ability to think logically and critically through things. Um, this might be a little dangerous for me to do, but I was thinking, what if we were to look at the patterns of behavior, the patterns of fatherlessness, imprisonment, and drug abuse and crimes in terms of classes rather than in terms of colors. Because I was thinking, um, a lot of the times we assume that there's just only the majority of the people that make up the lower and middle lower classes of society is like 99.9% black and Hispanic. And I don't think that's the case. I think actually that there are a lot of white people in the lower echelons of the social constructs of classes. For example, and I was just thinking, okay, this is a working theory. I could be totally wrong about this. It could be entirely about race. I don't think it is. But again, this is just a working theory that I was kind of thinking through in class because we were reading Michel Foucault's book of punishment, crime and punishment, or punishment and discipline, excuse me. And he was saying some really interesting things about um, the constructions of societies and how um, usually it's the lower classes of people who have the tendency to be considered disorderly. And then for whatever reason, people want to make the jump to disorderly lower class means or equals black, which could be, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. Again, the reason I want to think of this as more in lines of social classes rather than race is because if we think of social classes, then we erase this narrative that somehow race is the issue. And then a lot of the problems that we're seeing here now won't really stand. And of course, I'm gonna talk about things that are usually said about black people and Hispanic people and white people, and but I want to look at some statistics first. I already know there's going to be some pushback. Statistics are not very widely accepted, especially in our culture and our society right now, because again, emotions and feeling reigns supreme. So, as I was looking at this, I just wanted to see first of all, um, as we're looking at the population, the number of the population in the United States, what does the population numbers look like? And I mean, I knew I had an inkling to believe that white people made up a majority of the population in the United States. But this is from here. Let's see here. This is from census.gov. So these are statistical facts about populations, numbers of populations, consensus, or a census in the United States. The total number of people that live in the United States is 320 million people. That's a big number. Not nearly as big as some other countries, but it's a pretty significant number. And then I was wondering, well, how many white people make up the number of that 321 million? And 77%. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but that is mind blowing to think that over 240 million Americans in the United States are white people, and only 13% are black, according to the statistics provided in 2015. And then the other larger number would be Hispanic people at 17%. And then the others are pretty much statistically irrelevant, except for maybe Asians. But to think that white people make up this much, and I think this number is actually more conclusive. White alone, not Hispanic or Latino present. So this percentage is probably a little closer to the actual reality of the number of white people that live in the United States. Which makes me wonder if the number of white people is so much significantly higher in population than the rest of the number of the population in the United States, why do we tend to think then that white people are the problem just because they're a larger portion, a larger number of them in the United States? It makes sense that there would be. I mean, this country was discovered mostly by white people. Puritans, Europeans that came from the Europes to try to establish a country of justice and freedom. But I didn't want to just stop there. I didn't want to just see how many of the people actually live in the United States. I wanted to see who make up the lower classes of the United States, who is actually part of the poverty of the United States. How many white people are there? What is the percentage of white people that make up the poverty? What is the percentage of black people, Hispanic people that make up poverty? Since those are the three major um, demographics in the United States, I wanted to look those up. So I was interested. And I wanted to see what was happening. So again, looking up at the census.gov. I mean, this is all verifiable, so you can check it out yourself if you want to. But as I was looking at this, I was starting to read the poverty rate for families, and the number of families in poverty were 10.4% and 8.6 million in 2015, a decrease from 11.6% and 9.5 million families in 2014. So there has been a decrease in the number of people who are experiencing poverty, which is a good thing, which means the economy is going up. And if you hear that laughing, that's my kids out there in the living room. But I wanted to see what the races were that made up the percentage of those in poverty. In 2015, 9.1% of non-Hispanic whites, remember that was the non-Hispanic whites were the 61.6% of the population, which makes up about closer to 200 million people. Oops. But I would continue to read that the 9.1% of non-Hispanic whites were in poverty. That's 9.1% of 61% of the population. So the majority of the population is white, but even though they're white, because they make up a larger portion of the demographics in the United States, this number is actually significant. It's significant. And you say, why? Well, because 9% of 200 million people is a lot of people. I mean, it's almost 200,000 people. That's 180,000 white people. Oh, excuse me, no. No, what am I thinking? 18 million white people. And it says right here, the number is in poverty decreases to 17.8 million, down from 19.7. So yeah, 18 million white people that are experiencing poverty. That's a lot. And this is significant too. Non-Hispanic whites accounted for 61.4% of the total population. Remember, that was this number right here, 61.4, 61.6. Relatively the same. And 41, almost half of the percent of people in poverty. Half of the people in poverty. And it goes on to say both the rate of and number of Hispanics in poverty in 2015 decreased to 21.4% compared to the 23.6. So there has been a decrease in those numbers of Hispanic people experiencing poverty. And I tend to think, how can it be decreasing if white people are holding them back? But I'll get to that. But you say, well, that's a significant number, 21.4. That's way more than 9.1%. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more because, again, they only make up about 12% of the total population, right? Or excuse me, no, 17% of the total population. So they have one third of the amount of people than white people total. So it would make sense mathematically that the number of people experiencing poverty in the Hispanic community would be larger. But if these numbers were switched around, if Hispanics were larger in demographics than white people, I wonder if these would be reflecting the same number. I tend to think if there were 200 million Hispanics, would the number really be 21.4%? Or would it be 9.1%? So it decreased from 21.4% and 12.1 million from 23.6% and 13.1 million in 2014. So they make up a number of 12.1 million, which is relatively the same as white people, which is 17.8. But again, there's a lot more white people than there is Hispanic people. So it makes sense that they have 5 million more than Hispanics. Especially because Hispanics make up almost 20% of the population. But look at this. Both the rate and number of blacks in poverty in 2015 decreased from 24.1% to from 26.2% in 2014. Which this number is actually also significant because, again, what was the number of or percentage of demographics for black people? 13%. So it would make sense that their number statistically would be a little bit higher than that of the Hispanic and the white people. But their number is 10 million, which is a good reflection of what's happening here because look at this number is 21 and it's only at 12 million. And this number is 9.1%, and this is almost at 20 million. And you're probably thinking, so what's the point here, right? What am I trying to get at? Well, a lot of the times we tend to think that the issues facing black and Hispanic communities is due to a number of racially structured systems that are keeping blacks and Hispanics from being able to break away from those structures and those systems. But as we have seen, there are a significant number of white people in the poverty line. And you say, so what? Big deal. What's your point? And it's this. Everything true that you can say, or maybe not necessarily true, but everything that is supposedly true that are stated about blacks and Hispanics, meaning that is that motorcycle, meaning that if blacks and Hispanics cannot climb up the ladder because socially and what's happening in our society is that there is a system that's suppressing blacks and Hispanics from being able to move up in society because of racial systems. And therefore blacks and Hispanics are more likely to be imprisoned, more likely to have fatherless homes, more likely to be arrested, more likely to be killed by cops, more likely to live on welfare and to stay poor because of the welfare systems, and everything that you would say about black and Hispanics are true about poor white people. So if I were to say there's a demographic of people and they make up 41.6% of the poverty in the United States, and in these homes there is 30% or more that are without fathers, and they tend to be pulled over and seen as a threat by the police. They use drugs more often than none. They sell drugs more often than none. They're in and out of prison constantly. Their children grow up without education, proper education. They're in ghettos and they live in poor housing constructions and in societies that seem to suppress them. You would think I was talking about black or Hispanic people, but I'm talking about poor white people. And I can already hear all the triggerings that are happening. Look at the problem is, and this is my opinion, and I think this is true, one of the most marginalized and voiceless people in all of the United States are the poor white demographics. They're facing everything that poor black and Hispanic people are facing. Everything that you can say about poor black and Hispanic people are true about poor white people. They get killed by the cops. They get arrested in large numbers. They don't get an education. They're viewed as lower parts of the society, and they make up a larger number of both black and Hispanic people because there's more white people in the United States. So it shouldn't surprise us that there's more poor white people than there is poor black and Hispanic people. And you say, well, the percentages don't match up. There's only 9.1% of poor white people, where our people make up almost a quarter of that number. And it says, and I say yes, because the population, the demographics of blacks and Hispanics are significantly less than that of white people in the United States. And the reason I can say that poor white people are the most voiceless and marginalized people in the United States is because they're already viewed as part of the problem. They have no voice. We assume already that white people don't have problems because simply they are white. So when a poor family, white family, that's fatherless, whose children are growing up with drugs, whose daughters are growing up pregnant at teenage years, and they have a lot of social issues, and they're living on WIC and on welfare and all the same things that you can say about black and Hispanics. But yet nobody cares about them because the assumption is they're white. All they have to do is work hard, and they can easily take advantage of the same system that all the richer white people are taken advantage of. And that's such a racist mentality. It's such a racist mentality because the assumption is simply because they're white, they have certain privileges that they're unwilling or they're too lazy or they're not wanting to take advantage of. And that's racist. And I know I'm going to trigger a lot of people. But again, this is a working theory. I don't know how true or really how much more I have to think through these things. But as I think about this, because I tend to think also, if it's not about race but about class, then there should be certain things that we can say about upper class, upper middle class people that are true all across the board about them, right? So if I were to say everything you can say about a poor, rich, white family can be just as easily said about a rich black family, rich white family. Everything you can say about a rich white family, you can say about a rich black or a rich Hispanic family. Meaning, if you go into a nice neighborhood, into the suburbs, yes, the demographics are going to be more white. Why? Because there's a larger number of white people in the demographics. And if that's the case, then it would make sense that there's less black and Hispanic people in the upper and middle upper classes of society. And I have to say this carefully because I already know there's probably a lot of people thinking I'm an idiot or I'm a racist or I'm whitewashed, and that's part of the problem is I'm trying to think through these things in such a way as to not push the narrative that it's a race thing, but rather it's a class culture thing. And that is that anything you would say about a rich white family, meaning they're viewed as non threatening and as educated and as privileged and as powerful and as beautiful and as established and as um, honorable or whatever, all the virtues of richness in white people can be said about rich black people. Rich black people aren't viewed as threats. They're viewed as educated. They're viewed as um, powerful. They're viewed as higher in society. The same thing can be said about rich Asian or rich Hispanic people, rich anybody. So the purpose of me saying this is that the reason that the narrative is being pushed by the media and by society is that it's a race thing is because a lot of the times there is this sense of entitlement from minority groups, meaning black and Hispanics want things right now. They want them now. They want their fair share. But what about poor white people? Why aren't they out there saying the same things? Or maybe they are out there saying the same things. I don't know. Again, I'm thinking through these things, and please feel free to post up my comment box down here, man, and let me know because I think it's time to change the narrative. I think it's time to stop looking at the race and start looking at the class and recognize that there's patterns of behaviors in classes. Because if we say there's a pattern of behavior in upper class and upper middle class society, there's a pattern of behavior, there's a way society looks at them and how they're treated and how they're structured. And all those things are true irregardless of race, then the same things can be said about the poor, lower, and middle lower classes of society. But let me know what you think because I could be wrong. You could say I'm an idiot. You can say I'm a racist. You can say all types of things. But I'm asking you to try to think through this logically. And I'm not saying that we should create anarchy. No, I'm a patriot. I love my country. I'm a veteran. I served my country for 5 years. And so I think this is me thinking out loud. What needs to start taking place is we need to start recognizing the different roles in the home and start giving more responsibility to fathers again, teaching them that fathers are necessary for the home. Get rid of drugs in the United States, make an all out war against drugs in the United States. Not a war on people. People are victims of the drugs that are being passed. Help the people, but get rid of the drugs. I think another thing that we can do is teach people how to be content with what they have and what they don't have. Because a lot of the times, the reason that people steal, the reason that people do sell drugs, it's not so that they can provide for their family. That's almost minimal. A lot of the times, the reason they do these things is so that they can have more things that they don't have, instead of being content with the gifts that God has given them. I know it's gonna be crazy. I can already hear the masses yelling, but I really want to know what you think, and I really want to know: is this even a good theory? Is this even theoretically plausible? Um, so please let me know. Share this video. Let other people think through this. Maybe it's time to change the narrative. Because if we change the narrative and start actually targeting the issues that are facing our classes, rather than trying to find this mystical thing that's happening in races that might not necessarily be true, I think we could really start changing this country. We can really start targeting issues that are actually meaningful and actually have meaningful results, and can actually make this place better for our future generations. So let me know. Tell me what you think. I hope you do. I'm sorry about the background noises. My kids are playing in the living room. Um, so I would appreciate it if you guys subscribed. Please share your thoughts, your ideas. Post videos, post comments, ask questions. I'll try to answer them either by commenting back on the comment box or making a small video, depending on um, how big the question is and how much I need to think through these things. So let me know. All right, guys. God bless you. Appreciate you guys listening. Later.